So there are two little books that are Ripples and Meanderings, and this is the second one here. It has a green heron in it for Patty, and then another selection of designs. And I kind of settled on, as I was stitching, thinking about ripples and the ripples that each of us makes in our lives, the different ways we touch other people, and the different ways that other people touch us. So there's a lot of a lot of ripples going on. So as I was doing each of these stitching, sometimes I was thinking about the meandering paths that we take to get where we are. Sometimes I was thinking about circles and ripples. So that kind of carried out through the theme of the whole book. And then in the center book is called Woven Together, because the other thing that I was thinking about as I was making this book was how Patty really provided the warp threads, the vertical threads for all of our projects. And so what I did for this one was I took 15 different projects that I worked on in Patty's classes, and I used her threads that she had dyed with the different natural dyes as the warp. And then the weft is pieces of some of my favorite projects that we worked on. So there are little pieces of all different things. We did everything from making paper to eco printing to figuring out some things on letterpress to paste papers, gel plate printing, just all kinds of different things, and making lots of different structures. So this is the woven together piece of all the different projects, and it's on paper that we made in class. Well, as sort of in class, we made it in a summer workshop. We did paper making for a summer workshop. And then the covers on these books and also the accordions in the other books are all from eco-printed papers that we did in Patty's classes. So the structure I really like a lot because it very neatly packs up and houses everything. So it rolls up like this and folds together in a very nice, neat little package. So what I hope that people will take away from this is how each of us creates ripples and each of us meanders around through things, and each of us depends on others to help provide some of the warp threads as we work on different aspects of our lives, but especially in book arts. So questions?
Yeah, thank you, Fran. That was lovely. Yeah, do we have any questions in the chat? I had a question for you. I mean, you covered things pretty thoroughly, but I was just curious where this project started for you. Did it start with I mean, beyond wanting to honor your friend, did it start with the structure? Did it start with the idea that you're talking about ripples and warp and weft? Can you just kind of talk just briefly about where it started for you?
Sure. Well, I really liked the structure a lot. So, you know how when you create a book, what you're supposed to do is start on the inside and work out? One of the challenges was that I started on the outside and worked in because I I saw this roll-up box. There's a woman whose name is Bep van Gesteren, I believe. I think she's Dutch. But anyway, she put a tutorial of this book up, which was just measurements basically, and all in metric, and I had to change the measurements for the size of what I was thinking about. And so it was really an interesting challenge to make. And once I got the box made, I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to put it in. I wanted to use all the fabrics and do some stitching. So I kind of knew that. But what happened in the one that's in the exhibit there is it's really stuffed because 15 things, fitting 15 of each thing in there was really hard. So I really learned a lot about, yes, this is the reason that you design from the inside out rather than from the outside in.
Great.
Thank you. So if you want to, so mine is zines. What is a zine? From Wikipedia, a zine, which is short for magazine or fanzine, is a small circulation, self-published work of original or appropriated text and images, usually reproduced via a copy machine. The zines I make use a single sheet of copier paper that has been folded, cut, and possibly stapled to produce anywhere from 8 to 16 pages. There are dozens of variations to folding and cutting the same sheet of paper that can produce hidden pages, pop-ups, codex style, accordion style, portrait or landscape orientation, and more. The formatting is very versatile, and the collection on exhibit shows that, although most of the zines are simple X-zines, which is shown in the final slide. There. So that's an X-zine laying folded and cut. There's a center cut. It's laying flat. So now if we can stop the screen share. Yeah. I made my first zine in 2013 after taking a One Sheet Wonders class with Judy Christensen. It's the story of my little free library and how it came to be. I didn't know it at the time, but this set the stage for my love of zines as memoir. The small size makes it perfect to tell stories from my life because I'm forced to be sparing with my words and illustrations simply as a matter of space. Sometimes my memoir zines deal with big issues and stories that cover years. My zine, History of a Family, a Love Story, tells the story of my family, how we grew from a mother and daughter to a family of 4, and then the loss of my husband. I had originally made this for Valentine's Day and just for my family. In 2023, when my husband was first hospitalized, I realized that the caregivers only saw the frail man in front of them and didn't know who he was. I went home that first night and printed copies of the original zine and gave them to everyone who came into the room. This had an amazing effect on how they responded to him. I modified it over his illness with this final version after his death in 2024. Most of my zines are more immediate and may tell a short anecdote such as, oops, or never jump off a moving train in Italy again, or a full day such as A Day in the Life, which describes a normal day during the time that I was caring for my husband and trying to take care of myself as well. My zine club, also known as the Moorhead National Zine Collective, and Denise is a member, with over 20 national members, offers me a monthly prompt. Often the prompt feels impossible or not meaningful to me, but then somehow I'll find the link to tell a story that's been on my mind. As an example, my zine, I Want to Tell Grant, features reflections I'd been having after my husband died. I wanted to use those in a zine, but I wasn't sure how to make them interesting. The prompt of Invisible Blue Drawing, which was 3 words randomly selected by the group, gave me the idea. I changed a digital image of a pointillism drawing I'd done of Grant from black to light blue. I added the drawing to each page and made it transparent so that the text could go over it. This is definitely one of my most emotional zines. Since submitting this group, the selection that you saw in the slides, I've made a number of additional memoir-based zines, including Fear of Dennis. That prompt was emotions. 9 Lives, The Kitties I Have Loved, which the prompt was 9 lives. And The People versus the Golden Gate Bridge. The People versus the Golden Gate Bridge 26, GG 26. It's a 4-part series based on, there's an additional one so far, based on the courtroom sketches I made while attending my daughter's trial for protesting the genocide in Gaza. The prompt for this series is windows, which I use to show a window into our justice system. As we are awaiting sentencing and retrial of deadlock charges, there will likely be additional zines in this series. What I love most about zines is the ability to easily reproduce them and share with many people in a short time. My Little Free Library zine is my most published because I offer copies in my own Little Free Library and have to replenish it frequently. And now my GG26 series is running a close second because I was distributing it to the defendants, attorneys, families, and supporters, along with my zine club and friends. I think I've made at least 75 of each of these so far. A week ago, I was able to produce 35 copies of the fourth in the series and reprint 20 copies of each of the other three, totaling 95 zines, printed, cut, folded, and stapled over roughly 8 hours. So that's pretty quick production. Anyway, that's what I got. Thank you.
Okay. So the geometry of 15. I do a lot of work with geometric shapes in my abstract practice. Gina, if we could go to there we go, the first slide. So I began this project by doing a lot of research about the number 15 because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I started by looking at 15 in a lot of disciplines. I researched the magic of 3. I think it was when I was doing that I discovered that in Hebrew, instead of using what I use to get to 15, which is thinking of 5 times 3, that it's actually the addition of 9 plus 6, tet plus vav, to avoid the name of God, which would be created if you did it in other ways. So, in a specific other way, which I believe is 10 and 5. So then I went down a rabbit hole with dates. There were all kinds of things historically that happened on the 15th. And of course, many of us think of the Ides of March if we think of the 15th, the assassination of Julius Caesar. But also the first escalator was patented on March 15th, 1892. Or Ruth Bader Ginsburg was born on March 15th, 1933. Or the first internet domain, now don't we wonder about that, was started in 1985. So then I chose the star book, and now we've got a little bit of sense of that star book, but we're holding on the actual star for a moment. And I thought because 5 pages, 3 deep, we've got 15. But geometry, how was I going to add that to it? The pentadecagon, which is a 15-sided shape, provided a lot of work for me to figure out which pentadecagons. So once you've got that 15 points, if you will, how you connect the lines or what kinds of shapes you make out of that is what led to each of these 5 pages. Let's see, I had to cut them and play with them and cut out shapes within them, thinking about triangles and hexagons, which often come into the play with these numbers. If we can go to the next one. So finally, I chose the colors. And I made a stable inside and outside, so brown on the outside and white on the inside, and shifting colors in the middle. So I felt like I had done 3 by 5 again. We've got the 5 colors, but 3 layers of them. And this view is the view that I think, to me, leads to what is it I hope that viewers get. So for me, this view is very intriguing. And I hope that this view and the view you saw previously, but from 5 sides, leads viewers to be intrigued by the cutouts, by the shadows, by the, for me, undulating geometry of it, especially as we view it here from above. And I just want to thank PSBA for including this image and several of the images for advertising this show, because I felt very honored and delighted by it. So that's the geometry of 15.
Thanks, Denise. Okay, do we have any questions? I don't see any in the chat, but and I might just move along because we're running a little bit behind. So up next is Laura Russell. Laura, take it away.
Thanks everybody for being here today. It's really nice to see so many familiar faces. I've missed y'all since I left the Pacific Northwest and for the desert, but it's great to be here. I'm happily retired in Tucson and have my studio in a little spare bedroom in our house, so it's great. So my book is titled Allegiance, Postcards from America, And I actually have another subtitle for it. I think it should be Take Back the Flag. And Gina, next slide, please. So I was once told that my photographic process was like butterfly collecting rather than serious photography. I was really offended by that at the time, but now I think it's true. I shoot something every day. Every place I go, every time I go somewhere, I see something to shoot. Over time, those images accumulate to form a pattern, then a narrative, and then finally a book emerges. For Allegiance, a call for book art tied to the 250th anniversary provided a thread that bound together an otherwise odd collection of flag photographs. Sometimes these photographs are serious, sometimes they're simply absurd. For example, this roadside giant that you see on the cover of the book is on Route 66 near St. Roberts, Missouri. He's perched outside of Uranus Fudge Shop, and he's wearing a sash that declares him the mayor of Uranus, which I love. Next slide, please. Allegiance had a very difficult start. Early on, I was worried about taking a visible political stance, particularly given the MAGA men in my family back home in Michigan, who I still love for some reason. I can't explain why, but for some reason, I feared their reaction to this book, and they really clouded my creative process for months. As I designed the book, I initially tried to remain politically agnostic, focusing on the symbolism rather than ideology. I thought neutrality would invite people to have these great conversations about the book instead. And by the third draft, though, I realized I was avoiding the work's core. Somewhere between multiple mock-ups and trusted critiques, I finally found my spine and decided this book had to take a position. I had decided I had to take back the flag. When you open the book, you encounter a case-style cover with 5 booklets attached to the inside covers. On the left side is a tall stitched pamphlet book that functions as a travel diary. It includes personal reflections of each of the photos, stories behind the photographs, and bits of vexillological research, myth, lore, and unapologetic sentimentality. Next slide, please. On the right, the 4 accordion booklets look like postcards that map out the road trips between Detroit and Portland, from the Ozarks to the Mojave Desert, and many places in between. On the reverse side of each postcard is a postmark that notes the location and date of the photograph, and aligned to seemingly you might want to tear out the photograph and send it off to someone. But on the left-hand panel, these reverse panels also contain short condensed narratives on the 4 topics, such as the history of flag design, the history of the Star-Spangled Banner, the story behind the Pledge of Allegiance, and ironically, rules for proper flag display. Next slide, please. The photographs are sorted into 4 themes. Home is at the very top accordion. It's in everyday displays of flag pride at home. Bigger, as in monumental flags, often painted on buildings or sometimes a bus. Resistance, when flags are used in protests, is the 3rd accordion. And the last one is dandy, as in Yankee Doodle Dandy. Next slide, please. When unfurled to the full 44-inch width, the book, the accordions themselves resemble a flag. The cover is so large and tricky that it's 17 inches tall. It was very tricky to deal with in the dry Arizona desert air. So I had to learn an entirely new process for binding the covers of this book. And that's all I have to say about this book. Thank you for having me. If you go to laurarussell.com, you can find a one-sheet wonder based on this book that you can download for free and print it out. So thanks for being here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Laura. There were a couple of comments in the chat you should look at. And does anybody have any questions for Laura? Such an intriguing structure. If not, I will proceed to Pat Chupa and Belinda Hill. We're going to start with Pat. Let me just advance the slides. Okay, Pat, take it away.
I'm going to go through the prompts because it was a beautiful progression that you gave us to work with. What inspired the work? Well, 15, wasn't it? That was the starting point for all of us. But and it's amazing all the different directions we ended up on the theme of one number. But at any rate, in terms of whether was there a personal connection, I have to pay tribute to my collaborator, Belinda, because for me, um, the impetus to do this project came from her reaching out to me at a time when I had been in a fallow place in terms of doing book art, because I have had visual problems for the last couple of years, which have made it extremely difficult to function creatively, and it's been a long journey. And the point at which she called me and said, "Would you like to do a book together?" I said, "Oh." And then we decided that it would be a good idea. And so we divided it up. I would do the big things and she would do the small things. And so it would be a perfect marriage at that point. And so that's how we got here. The first picture is the preliminary sketch that I drew out on a piece of memo paper in a coffee shop where we sat together and figured out how are we going to proceed and what shape is it going to take and how are we going to do this. And so that led us first to the using the device of doing a broad search for everything having to do with 15, so that we would figure out all the different components and then try to distill those into some format that showed the variation of the variety of the ways people all around the world and in many different traditions and over centuries and probably thousands of years have interacted with that number, and then bring it down to our specific situation, which is our book arts forms. And so we met periodically during this period of working together to update each other on how we were doing with our particular part of the piece, and had these conversations where we batted it back and forth ideas. What are we going to do? And so when after at this meeting was when we came up with the turtle, the tortoise, um, and that was because we found a referring to a legend in Chinese mythology about the appearance of a turtle out of a flood of river, and the emperor of China interpreting why the turtle had come out of the river because the people wanted the flooding to stop, and all of the ecological implications of that struck me. But it was like, oh my goodness, this is our we have to have a turtle. The turtle has to be in the form. And so I sketched out the idea for a tortoise or turtle, that would be the vehicle that would carry the messages that we wanted to impart about what we've discovered in our journey. And so that's how we got to the form. The size of the turtle was determined by our decision together to have 9 different small book structures showing all the different variety of structures that we use in book arts. And Belinda was going to incorporate all of our findings, or as much of our findings as we felt we could, in 9 structures to provide people with some ways to go down rabbit holes if they so desire about tortoises and turtles and numbers and history and mystery. And so then, yes, the structure did evolve. I've had some experience with making paper mache sculptures, and so I volunteered to make the turtle. And then Belinda will tell you about the box and the structures. But it was we were able to. I was able to make the tortoise. And honestly, it just evolved. Thank you. This is the top of the tortoise's shell, the top shell of the tortoise. And you'll notice that it's got Chinese numbers, enumerating the numbers in the Lo Shu magic square, which is 9 different numbers, all of which add up to 15 in any direction that you add them together, which is the basis of the Lo Shu magic square. And that magic square is used in many different mythologies from all around the world. So it's something that spread through probably migration over eons, so that the tortoise and the turtle have become iconic figures in many different traditions. So the turtle is one of which I will say, and we talked about in the book, artist statement, um, that the Native American traditions refer to the continent of North America as Turtle Island. And that was another reason that I wanted to use the tortoise turtle, because of the ecological underpinnings of everything that we're experiencing now in our society and our culture. That the turtle is kind of a vehicle for carrying us all on its back while we try to figure out what we're going to do to survive. So that's about the tortoise. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, so here's a picture of the bottom of the tortoise and part of its neck, and maybe going to be a head when I got around to that. But the size of the turtle was definitely dependent on the size of the box that was going to be made to hold the 9 small books. So the box came first. And then when the box was done, I was given the box, and then I said, okay, now I have to make a tortoise to hold this box. So it was evolved from the inside out, which, as the former person was talking about, is yes, how we're supposed to make these things. Well, there was no other way to do this. At any rate, so that gives you a view of the sculptural part of this process, to make it possible for the tortoise to contain all of this inside of itself. Can I have the next? And this is the inside of the box with the 9 different books that Belinda made. And if Belinda wants to talk about them, this would be a good place.
Okay, go to
Over
the
to you.
next slide. So we just had the subtitle is Peregrination, which I've always just wanted to use in something. And it means not only a wandering journey, but a widely ranging discourse or treatment, which is kind of what happened with Pat and I, as we had so much that we could have put into this. And so finding what we wanted to put in, and I was one of the tricks of the whole thing. But I've been doing mini books, and so I just thought, it would be fun to tell some of these pieces that we came across in mini books. So there's the 9 different varieties of mini books. I think there's a link. I could put it in the chat in a minute that kind of goes through, tells the whole story and what's in each of the little books. So there's everything from artwork and Save the Tortoise, and something about the tortoises on the Galapagos Island, tortoise petroglyphs, something about Great Atuan, which is Terry Pratchett's tortoise that the elephants stand on. So it's just a wide range of things, and we just had a really fun time picking out some of the things that we wanted to include in this part. So I made the 9 mini books, and then I also made put together all of the information we had collected into a format that then Pat made into a small book that fits in a box under the tortoise.
Thank you. Thank you. So this is the image of the tortoise as it in its finished state. And for me, I had to choose the tortoise rather than the turtle, because everybody says, "What's the difference between a tortoise and a turtle?" And it is primarily that turtles are the aquatic version of the species, and tortoises are the land version of the species. And because I am a Virgo and totally earth-based in all of my orientation to this life, it made sense to me to make it a tortoise. And so it shall be a tortoise. And tortoise's name is Lo Shu, which is the name of the magic square, and the mythology associated with that creature. And so all of this is made, but with paper mache, uh, mesh, sculptural mesh that you can shape into different forms, with paper mache and leather and a lot of cave paper. um, and then the book box underneath is the codex form of a book that opens up as a book box that contains the book that tells you the story of our journey. So it's information within information. The top shell of the tortoise comes off completely to reveal the box inside and the small structures underneath it. I have a little story to answer the question, how do you hope people will engage with the work? And that is that when we had our exhibition opening and we got to sit next to our pieces around the cases at Collins Library, and people were coming around and looking at our work. A little girl came up to me with her mother and wanted to know about the tortoise. And so I told them the story of the emperor and the flood and the turtle coming out, the magic turtle coming out of the water. And she was like all ears. And then they thanked me very much and they went away. And then a little while later, she came back with her father, and she wanted, and I said, oh, I said, do you want to? She said, you have to ask her. And so I said, do you want? She said, I said to the little girl, do you want me to tell him the story? Is that all right with you if I tell him? And she said yes. And so I told him the story. And then they both thanked me and went away. And then about 15 minutes later, I heard the sound behind me, and the whole family was behind me with the other kids. And, and the little girl was telling the story to her family. So that's how I want people to engage with the work. That it's it's the transmission of myth from one person to another is how we get here. And so she's going to carry on probably sharing those stories and hopefully finding out more about turtles and tortoises in the process. If someone walked away with just one thing with your book, what would you want that to be? I think maybe what I want to say is that that for me, PSBA has been a tortoise that has carried me throughout my book art journey and nurtured and cared for all of us on its back. And we've all we're having a wonderful journey in this organization, and it functions in the same way to me as the tortoise does for Turtle Island, and that it's a way to understand that our surroundings and our environment will heal us and guide us and connect us with our creativity, and we need to cherish that as much as we can and continue it.
Thank you,
Belinda, you got
Pat.
any final? Belinda,
Thank you, Pat. Thank
words?
you, Belinda. And I just want to, I'm sorry to cut you off there, but we need to, we still have 2 more people to go, although people could skip me. And I just wanted to give a little brief moment for if anybody has a question that they want to ask. Okay. And then I just wanted to let everybody know that Belinda put the link to the website in the chat if you want to take a better, deeper look at the books that are in it too. So thank you both. It's such a beautiful piece, and I look forward to seeing it when I go to the open case in person next week. So thank you so much. Okay, I'm up. Hang on, let me change the cards. Okay. So I will be talking about my work, which I only call a book because in this group we're allowed to call anything we say as a book. But it's it's a departure for me. Let's just put it that way. So I'm going to show you my 3 slides and then I'll talk about it because it's going to show you how how you would, if you were handed this book, how you would open it. So the first image is the cover of the book, and my dear husband made me the box. So I had made the innards, and then he made the box to fit it, which was nice. And then, so the cover has a spiral and a moon type piece, and I typed the title with my old-fashioned typewriter, and this is fabric, but I've stiffened it, so it actually went in the typewriter, which was amazing. And then when you open the lid, there's a overlay of vintage fabric with some nice embroidery on it that I did not do the embroidery on that, but it fit perfectly for the box. And then you would peel back the 2 layers of cloth, and then what you see inside is this square piece of cloth that I embroidered and collaged with a bunch of different vintage linens. And then I've created 15 spirals, and that was my nod to the theme. So Imperfect Offering is a lot of things, and it started out as one thing and it became something else. But what it mainly is a reflection of my last 15 years as a book artist. That's sort of how I latched on to the theme of 15, thinking about what have I done and what has intrigued me and what has inspired me to keep making books for the last 15 years. And then the other inspiration was Leonard Cohen's song Anthem. And I just want to read you a brief little bit of that is part of the reason for this work. So the second stanza is, yeah, the wars, they will be fought again. The holy dove, she will be caught again. Bought and sold and bought again. The dove is never free. And you can't open it, but you can open it if you're in person with this piece, but that center spiral is actually a little box. And if you open it up, there is an origami dove inside. I'll show you I've got a little mini version of it here. So I made a dove that's sort of captured in the piece. And then the reason it's called Imperfect Offering is because of the next line, which is, ring the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. And so sorry, that makes me very emotional every time for some reason. So a bunch of the spirals, which again, I started with flat fabric that I used Material Magic on to stiffen it. And these are spirals that are based on Tomoko Fusei spirals, which is a nod to my interest in origami. And I've done a lot of altered books, especially using spirals over the last 10 or 15 years. I keep coming back to them. But I figured out a way back in 2017 to make the spirals curve instead of just collapsing in on themselves. And so I was doing that in this very formal way when I first started with these, but I had to stitch them to make them stay together, whereas with paper ones, I could use glue. And I realized I was painstakingly folding and then stitching one. I realized that if I just started sort of tucking it under and stitching it down, I didn't need to do all of the formal, folding and stuff. So that was an interesting thing that I learned while making it. And what else do I want to say? Yeah, I think that's about it. It's the first artist book I think I've ever made that's almost entirely made out of fabric rather than paper. The only paper, in fact, in this is there's an inner lining to that central spiral container, just because the fabric was not quite stiff enough to hold up. And but otherwise, it's all fabric. And I don't know if it's a book, but to me, it's bookish. So anyway, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Is there anything in the chat, Janet? No? Okay.
I don't see any.
Okay, thanks. So I will move on to introduce Jane Carlin, and she's going to talk about her lovely book and what inspired that. Jane, take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Gina. And before I start, I just want to thank everyone for coming to this and supporting the exhibition and the great response we've had to this. It's just been really heartwarming. So you can go to the first slide, and I'll be quick due to time constraints. But the idea behind 15 Objects is really exploring our relationship with things that shape our lives. We all have them. the objects we can't part with, the treasures we'd rescue first, the ones that spark joy, or conversely, the ones that might release in the spirit of Swedish death cleaning. A designer, Christopher Rosen, reminds us that our possessions are more than things. They shape how we see ourselves and how we tell our own stories. I wanted to capture stories that celebrate the memories and joys of items that are meaningful to me, but also meaningful to 15 of my friends. I was further inspired by an evening arranged by friend and book artist Jody Fenton, who has contributed to this book. So this goes back to the winter of 2024. She hosted a dinner party and asked everyone to bring an object that was special to share with others. This request lingered as I looked around my own home and began to ask the question, what objects hold the deepest meaning for me? What stories do they tell? I was also reading an interesting book called Good Pop, Bad Pop, An Inventory by Jarvis Cocker, a British singer and musician. The book has been described as a coming-of-age memoir, and I identified so much with the description that appeared on the book jacket. We all have a random collection of the things that made us: photos, tickets, clothes, souvenirs stuffed in a box, packed in a suitcase, or in a drawer. When Jarvis starts cleaning his things out, he finds a jumble of objects that catalog his story and describes this process as making a collage of his life. So I was inspired to make my own collage. You can go on to the next slide. So this book was very challenging to photograph. I know Mark is on the call, and I thank you for the photographs. It is 18 feet long when totally extended with images on both sides. So you might ask, why did you choose this particular structure or form? So many of you know me as a library director at the University of Puget Sound. But what you might not know is throughout my entire career, I've been working with artist books, studying the history of books as a graduate student, working in England with artist books, and starting collections at various libraries. So you can say that I not only read books and review books and write about books and collaborate with book artists. And so over the 15 years, I have dabbled behind the scenes in book artistry. But with the significance of celebrating 15 years of Puget Sound book artists, I felt I just had to contribute a book. And having the gift of time that retirement brings you, and a very talented daughter who is also an artist, it was a wonderful opportunity to collaborate together. The challenge, of course, for me was deciding on the form of the book. Should it be a bespoke, handmade volume with original drawings and illustrations? But how could I possibly bring all those design elements together with my limited technical skills? So determining the right format for telling these stories was a long process involving discussions with many of you, creating models that ranged from digital zines to single pages, to even repurposing some vintage family photo albums, nearly a century old, as the structure for the book. I was drawn to the symbolism of photo albums because they're pages that are touched by many hands and eyes, carrying the weight of memory. Yet their fragility made them impractical. Still, I held on to that inspiration because the photo album form carries a sense of nostalgia and remembrances. And so my daughter and I settled on using a vintage Chinese double-fold accordion book that I've had in my possession for years and years. It was just sitting there, beautiful, unused, and waiting for a purpose. I thought this structure might offer the perfect solution. I could preserve the intimate and tactile feel of a photo book using traditional mounting techniques to secure the text and images. Translucent paper was used for the text and adhered to the pages so that it might be lifted to see the symbolic red thread that runs continuously through every page of the book on both sides, that binds all the ideas together. Abby and I wanted to keep the book simple and elegant so that the stories could stand out. Next slide. So this book not only focuses on 15 personal objects of mine, and you can go on with the next slide, Gina. that I wanted to capture the thoughts and stories of others. So I reached out to 15 friends, many of whom are book artists, and I would like to acknowledge them. I don't have images of all of the pages right now, but I want to acknowledge Gina, who wrote a wonderful story of her mother's quilt. Jody Fenton, another book artist who talked about an embroidery piece that belonged to her family. Bonnie Thompson Norman discussed the importance of a whimsical ceramic that was given to her. Mark, an entire list of his 15 objects. Candace Litsky shared binders, tools, and Lucia Harrison shared a beautiful story of a collaboration with her daughter and travel to Japan, resulting in a ceramic cup. And Deb Creveling, who's also on this call, shared a wonderful story about a childhood bell. The layout and design was complicated for us because it was such a large format book. But we worked together diligently, my daughter and I, over last Christmas. I even carried the book back to England in March, and we continued to work on it there. So we're really thrilled to have it as a collaborative piece. When I think about what I hope people will engage with this work and take away from the book, I think it's important to remember that all of us have stories to tell, and everyone can relate to objects. What did I discover about thinking about objects? When you look at the book in person, you'll see the diversity of objects. You might ask, what would connect a bottle opener, a globe, a camera, a quilt, pieces of embroidery, bookbinders' tools, scarves, my own objects, considering a totem pole, sea glass, and paintings. But it really is the connection with important moments in all of our lives. Each object telling a unique personal story of meaning, emotional connection with a person, an event, or place, objects that inspire us and bring joy and happiness. And this is the thread that runs amongst all the stories and the 15. One of my favorite quotes from William Morris, the great British designer, is, "Have nothing in your house that you do not know to be useful or believe is beautiful." It's not about the amount of objects we have, but what they mean to you. Now, I try to live by Morris's creed. It's not always possible, but there is great joy in being surrounded by objects you love, old or new, valuable or not. For me, 15 objects is a bit like a cabinet of curiosities, a collage of my life. Objects are not just things, but they're anchors of memory. Objects bring us joy because of their beauty and design. Someday, others might not keep them, and that's all right. For now, they remind me of who I am, where I have been, and the stories worth carrying forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane. Such a lovely book, such a lovely idea to have presented. We do have one question in the chat. Angela wanted to know what the double fold accordion book structure is.
Well, you can look that up on there are usually books that are used in Chinese calligraphy, and it's just a very large format book structure. And I can send you a link to some of the research that I've done on them and sources.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm going to stop the screen share, and we have not very much time left, but a couple of minutes. If anybody has any questions for anyone who presented or just general questions, now is your chance. Give people a second, and you can unmute at this point and ask if you have something you want to say. No takers? Well, then
I have one.
You do.
Comment.
Go ahead.
I mean, just in general, when we discussed this way back and settling the theme for our 15th year, it was really like wondering how everyone was going to respond to that theme. And it's just been so interesting to see the interpretation and the unique personal stories connected with all of the books. And I just want to say thank you to everyone again.
Yes, thank you all who came to listen, and thank you especially to all the artists who agreed to share their books. I love nothing more than hearing from the artist what inspired the work and what the deeper meanings are. Because sometimes you look at a book or any art, any piece of art, and you see what you see, but you don't necessarily know what's behind it. So I really appreciate people sharing their stories, and I think everyone else agrees, and that's why we have such a nice turnout. So thank you all for coming, and I hope I see some of you at the in-person event next week as well that Jane will be hosting. All right, everyone have a lovely afternoon, and goodbye from us.